Welcome out, deep divers.
Mhm.
You know how we like to look at these really fascinating figures, right? And try to figure out, are they changing the world? Or are they just kind of out for themselves? Today, we're diving into a world where charisma and controversy, they kind of go hand in hand. You know,
Mm.
it's like this Venn diagram, and right in the middle, you've got today's subject, Armie Hammer.
Yeah. Armie Hammer, a name that not too long ago brought up, all these images of Hollywood glamour, those
Mm.
incredible performances.
Exactly. But now,
Now it's pretty hard to separate all that, from the shocking accusations that have really just taken over everything, haven't they? Both his career and his personal life.
so that's exactly it, right?
Yeah.
The question we're wrestling with today is he a grifter? Or is he gifted?
Mhm.
Is Armie Hammer someone who is really talented and kind of just lost his way? Or has this all been a show?
Well, he's been playing us this whole time
Yeah. Has he been crafting this image?
to hide something darker, to hide the truth.
Yeah. So to get to the bottom of this, we're going to be really digging into it. We'll look at how he became famous, the influence of his family. I mean, his family's legacy is a whole other story.
Right. Yeah.
We'll look at the accusations against him, how he's responded,
Yeah.
and, ultimately, is there any coming back from this? Can he redeem himself in the eyes of the public?
Public opinion is a fickle thing.
It really is.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's rewind. Let's go back to the beginning, Armie Hammer's early career. It's interesting because when you think about his family,
Right.
you think about the wealth, the connections, you just assume he had it easy in Hollywood.
Right. Like just handed to him on a silver platter.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's not really the whole picture. It's kind of a misconception. Armie's always said he wanted to make his own way, separate from his family.
Yeah, forge his own path.
And there is some evidence of that.
Yeah.
When you look at the start of his career, he had these smaller roles, a few missteps here and there, but then came The Social Network.
Oh, yeah. That's when things really changed. That was his breakout role, wasn't it?
Yeah.
As the Winklevoss twins.
It was such a memorable performance.
It was, playing both twins
In such a huge film.
captured the whole, social media thing.
The zeitgeist. Yeah, The Social Network really launched him, And after that, he just kept getting these high-profile roles.
The Lone Ranger, J. Edgar, the man from UNCLE. It
Wow.
seemed like he was on the fast track to becoming
A true Hollywood A-lister.
exactly. And then you've got Call Me By Your Name in 2017.
Beautiful film.
Heartbreaking love story. So much critical acclaim.
Got him a Golden Globe nomination.
And at
He
that point, it felt like he'd finally made it.
reached the top.
Right.
It wasn't just his career that seemed to be going so well either, He was married to Elizabeth Chambers, started a family, the perfect Hollywood power couple.
So looking back at all this,
Yeah.
what do you think? Does this seem like someone driven by real talent, ambition?
Mm-hmm.
Or are we already starting to see this persona?
This carefully constructed facade.
Yeah. It's hard to say at this point, isn't it?
Yeah. It's tough. You can definitely see the ambition there, the desire to prove himself. But he's also got this undeniable charisma, that ability to just draw people in.
He does.
It makes it really hard to figure out what's real and what's maybe part of the act.
Okay, so let's hold on to that thought for a second as we dig into the next layer of this story,
Yeah.
because this is where things get really interesting. The Hammer family legacy.
Yeah. This family.
They-
The Hammer name is pretty much synonymous with wealth, power, and controversy.
You can't talk about Armie without talking about his great-grandfather, Armand Hammer.
Oh, no, you can't. He casts a long shadow.
Right, this is the oil tycoon, larger than life.
A fortune built on, I guess we could say business savvy.
And maybe some dealings that were ethically...
Questionable.
Yeah, you're talking billions of dollars. Connections that stretch from,
White House,
to the Kremlin.
Armand Hammer's life. It's like something out of a movie.
It really is.
Hobnobbing with world leaders.
The priceless art collection.
Building Occidental Petroleum into this global giant.
But underneath all that success,
There were these whispers, always there.
shady business practices,
Possible KGB connections.
money laundering,
It's a complicated legacy, to say the least.
and the controversy, it didn't stop with Armand.
Oh, no, it didn't.
His son Julian was convicted of manslaughter, killed a man over a gambling debt,
And then more recently, there are those accusations against Armie's aunt.
sexual abuse.
It's like there's this pattern of darkness that runs through the family history.
Right, like this undercurrent of scandal.
It makes you wonder, how much did this environment shape Armie? Did it influence his worldview, how he saw power, how he saw success?
It's a really good question, especially when you think about Armie always saying he was financially independent.
Built his own career.
Right.
But when you think about how much money the Hammers have,
The advantages that come with that.
It makes you wonder about the authenticity. Was he really trying to separate himself, or was this just a different game he was playing?
Okay, so we've got this rising star, obviously talented,
So charismatic,
but carrying the weight of this family history.
filled of wealth and controversy.
Keep all that in mind as we move into the heart of this story, the unraveling of Armie Hammer's carefully constructed image.
Yeah, because remember, this was all happening while he was on red carpets,
Magazine cover.
getting all this critical acclaim.
And then January 2021,
The internet explodes
leaked DMs, allegedly from Armie.
with graphic content, disturbing fantasies.
And we're not talking your usual celebrity gossip here.
This was something else.
Domination, submission, cannibalism.
It was a shock.
It didn't fit the image he'd built at all.
And it didn't stop there.
More women came forward.
Accusations of abuse,
Emotional, psychological.
manipulation, gaslighting, even physical branding.
So different from the Hollywood heartthrob everyone thought they knew.
And then a woman named Effie accuses Armie Hammer of rape.
This changes everything.
This isn't just about messages or, bad behavior anymore. This is a serious criminal allegation.
The LAPD launches a full investigation.
And then to add to all of this, you've got the docuseries House of Hammer.
Premieres in 2022.
Interviews with several of his accusers, including Effie.
All these details about their experiences.
It was a media frenzy.
Armie's dropped from films.
Mm-hmm.
Loses his agent. The label cancels is attached to him. And the question becomes, how much of this is true?
Is he a predator?
Or is he the victim of some elaborate smear campaign?
It's a question we're going to have to keep digging into.
Welcome back to our deep dive. It's wild, isn't it? I mean, the accusations against Armie Hammer are intense, to say the least, and they really did just completely derail his career.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this was someone who had carefully crafted his public image.
And in the face of all this, Hammer has denied any wrongdoing. From the very beginning, he's said that everything was consensual.
Role-playing.
Right, like this was all part of some elaborate act.
His initial response to the leaked messages, remember, was basically to dismiss them.
Oh, yeah. He called them vicious and spurious online attacks. But as more women came forward,
with these detailed allegations of abuse, his denials, they had to become more specific, especially when it came to Effie and her accusation of rape.
Right, so he claims that that encounter was premeditated.
Planned in advance.
Consensual. And he says he even has text messages to prove it.
Though those have never been made public.
So it becomes this he said, she said situation.
Yeah, Hammer says it was all consensual.
Part of this role-playing dynamic.
But his accusers describe something very different.
Manipulation, emotional abuse that escalated into violence.
And you can't ignore the power dynamics here.
Oh, absolutely.
You've got Armie Hammer, wealthy, famous, powerful actor, versus these women, many of them young at the time.
Right. And that power imbalance is something that's really hard to just brush aside.
No, it's not. It's a huge factor.
Which brings us to the LAPD investigation.
This was a big turning point.
Because after 2 years of investigating, the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office announced they wouldn't be pressing charges.
May 2023.
Citing insufficient evidence.
And it's important to understand what this means.
And what it doesn't mean.
Right. Because the decision not to press charges doesn't necessarily mean Hammer's innocent.
It just means that legally, there wasn't enough evidence for a conviction.
Beyond the reasonable doubt.
So we end up with this lack of resolution.
On one hand, the legal system has spoken.
But on the other hand, you have these really serious allegations, and they're still out there.
Yeah, and the stories in the House of Hammer documentary are disturbing.
They really are.
It raises questions about consent, especially when there's this power imbalance.
Right, because even if some things were technically consensual, can you really call it that under these circumstances?
When one person has so much more power than the other.
It's so complicated.
And the lack of a clear legal outcome, it just adds to the uncertainty.
So where do we go from here? How do we make sense of all this?
Well, even though Hammer denies the most serious allegations, he has admitted to some things that are troubling.
Right. In that interview in February 2023,
he admitted to being emotionally abusive in some of his relationships.
And acknowledged the power imbalance
that his celebrity status created.
He basically said that he was the one setting the boundaries.
Which, again, doesn't mean he's guilty of a crime.
But it does align with some of the accusations.
So it adds this whole other layer to the question of, is he a grifter? Or is he gifted? Was this a moment of genuine self-reflection? Or was it a way to control the narrative?
Because we've seen a shift in his story, haven't we?
We have.
From complete denial to admitting some wrongdoing to even saying that being canceled was liberating.
That Bill Maher podcast appearance, it really added fuel to the fire.
He said he'd never been happier. Therapy? A new perspective, focusing on being a good father.
But people had mixed reactions. Some saw it as genuine.
Others saw it as a PR stunt to try and make a comeback.
It's hard to know what to believe.
So that's what we're going to be looking at in the final part of this deep dive. The aftermath. What happens to someone like Armie Hammer after all this? Okay, so we're back. It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? Trying to figure out Armie Hammer grifter or gifted.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
And I don't think we're going to have a nice, neat answer for you guys. I think what we've learned is there are no easy answers here.
No, not with this one.
We've seen his rise, the fall, that family legacy.
I mean, what a story.
It really is. All the accusations, the denials.
Yeah.
And now he's trying to, make a comeback.
It's a lot to process.
And, when we think back to the beginning, he's in his career. Those choices he made.
Trying to distance himself from the family name?
Did it seem genuine? Or was it all part of the act?
It's really hard to know now, isn't it?
It is. And then you've got the allegations themselves.
The messages, the accusations from all these women.
Those stories are really hard to ignore.
No matter what Hammer says.
Even with the lack of charges.
It's that classic he said, she said.
But it's even more complicated than that.
Because of the power dynamics,
Right.
This wasn't a level playing field.
You've got this wealthy, famous actor.
Versus these young women.
Who felt pressured.
Manipulated.
And even if some of it was technically consensual, can we really call it that when one person has so much more power?
It's a question that sticks with you even after the LAPD finished their investigation.
Yeah.
And even though they didn't press charges, it doesn't mean people aren't still thinking about it, talking about it.
It feels like public opinion is almost more powerful than the law these days.
It often is.
So can someone really come back from this? Can they change? Can they redeem themselves?
After everything that's happened.
That's what everyone's asking, isn't it? It's a huge question for our society.
It really is. We're seeing it play out everywhere.
In the media, online, our own conversations.
And there's no right answer.
Hammer's saying he's focusing on his kids, on therapy.
He says being canceled was liberating.
Claims to be a changed man.
But is he?
Is it genuine? Or is this just all about saving his career?
We don't have the answer to that.
And I think that's the point of all this. We haven't given you a clear-cut conclusion.
No.
We've shown you the evidence, the messiness of it all, and we want you to think for yourselves.
Because it's important.
Image is everything these days.
And charisma can be so powerful.
We have to be critical thinkers.
Question everything.
Recognize the power dynamics at play.
Hold people accountable.
But also be open to the idea that people can change.
It's not easy.
So keep asking questions.
Challenge your own assumptions.
Remember that sometimes things aren't black and white.
There are shades of gray.
And maybe that's the biggest lesson we can take away from all this.
From Armie Hammer's story.
That sometimes there are no easy answers.
Sometimes you just have to keep searching for the truth.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Until next time.
Keep questioning.
Keep exploring.
And keep diving deep.